Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap Tuesday. It is so awesome to see you all here, and I'd just like to welcome our co-host tonight. I have with me Jeff Masters. How are you, Jeff? And also Kent. Kent, you're actually just on mute at the moment, so I'm just going to ask you to unmute there. Hopefully we can have a chat with you. As always, yeah, I can hear you now. That's great. As always, we love to ask you guys, how has your week been? Because we TAP executives get so busy, we don't always get to chat to each other every day. So we'll start with you, Jeff. You're filling in for Lance tonight. He's just come back. He's been very busy. But how's your week been, just very quickly?
Yeah, no, it's been great, Ains. Look, a lot of success with what we've been working on with the Tribal Nations. I know I've just sent you an email so we can finalise all the maps. And then get some paperwork in. That's sort of the goal for this week. But yeah, look, there's a lot of momentum with the tribal elders coming in to take their unceded land back. So that's a good thing for all of Australians.
Excellent. And Kent, how's your week been?
My week's been absolutely fantastic and hectic. I just want to start by saying how good you two look tonight. I feel grateful to be in your company, and I'm excited. What number Triple Tap is this tonight, Ainsley? Do you know?
Yes, I do. Of course I know, Kent. You know me, very diligently keep track of all these. We are up to episode number 53. So we have definitely hit the 1 year mark, which is a really exciting milestone because, as you know, when we started Triple Tap, we were definitely amateurs. We knew nothing about how to host a regular podcast. But I think we just got better and better, and we certainly get over these technical challenges quite well. So
well, I've got to say, most of that effort is down to you, Ainsley, and I really appreciate that. Hey, my week's been fantastic. Guys, just personally, I want to tell you, I have beaten coffee.
Oh, no.
I have beaten coffee. I have never slept so well. I feel just so much better. I feel with so much more energy. My adrenal glands are getting back in place, my adrenals or whatever it is. I've beaten it. And I think that's a massive milestone for me. So I'm just sharing that with you. That was the good news from my week.
Oh, well, I don't think I'll be joining it anytime soon, Kent, because I do definitely love my coffee. Kent, we've got a very interesting person that I'm going to introduce very, very shortly, but you're an ex-cop, they're an ex-cop. And of course, one of the top stories over here in Western Australia, where I live at the moment, that I've just heard, quite terrible. A 48-year-old WA police officer has been charged with multiple counts of child sex offences allegedly committed on a young girl, a 13-year-old, back between 2009 and 2012, which is quite appalling. How often do you think these things are going to get investigated and actually have someone like this put behind bars?
Okay, so if this person's rank and file, they will definitely be investigated, and they will go as hard on them as they possibly can. It is only when, and I have, there's plenty of proof about this through the history of the government of Australia. If you are high ranking, they will cover it as much as they can. Okay, so if you're low ranking, similar, if you're a politician, if you're a low ranking politician, they will go you as hard as they can. But if you're high ranking, that's just what it is. They cover it up. There you go. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, tonight, guys, almost 38,000 missing people are reported to police every year in Australia. That's one every 14 minutes. Some do not return home, and for their families, it's a never-ending nightmare. For police, the search for answers can sometimes last for decades, and for tonight's guest, it's no different. His bio is longer than normal. However, I'm going to read through it because in my opinion, he deserves it. Sometimes in life, you come across an extraordinary person or extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I'd like to introduce one such man to you tonight. So just give me a second. I'm just going to quickly screen share. I've got a couple of slides that you can view instead of viewing me while I read through this incredible bio before we bring him onto the interview. So it's going to be exciting. Have your questions ready, guys, because I will be monitoring the chat and you will be able to ask questions throughout the show. We'll ask them of this gentleman. His name is Meni Caroutas. So hopefully I've pronounced his last name correctly. And from a young age, Meni was always going to become either a cop or a journalist. He always had an inquiring mind, always asking lots of questions, and was brought up by his parents to have compassion for other people, especially if they were going through a tough time. After high school, he went to university, but he left to join the New South Wales Police Force. He asked to be stationed at Darlinghurst Police Station because he wanted to learn as much as he could, and he believed that would be best served at a busy city station. After a couple of years at Darlinghurst, he moved to King's Cross Police Station, which he describes as being the carnival, circus, and the Mardi Gras all rolled into one. Meni rose quickly through the ranks and was recruited to the King's Cross Detectives Office during the notorious 1980s. And after going public on the ABC's 7:30 report to expose corruption, he was spotted by a TV producer and offered a reporter's job on a new tabloid current affairs program called Hard Copy. In 1992, Meni left the police force and began his media career. And as a reporter on Hard Copy, he instigated a series of stories on missing people. The first story he covered was on 16-year-old Debbie Ashby, who disappeared in 1987 from southwest Sydney. This story has always stuck with him, and he revisited Debbie's case and speaks to her family in the first episode of the new podcast series, The Missing. Meni has always been committed to finding the truth and getting justice for people who have been unfairly treated. He has a strong sense of right and wrong and believes in doing the right thing. And over the years, his stories have exposed corrupt cops, shady financial institutions, and shonky businesses, and he always fights for the rights of victims. As a cop and now as a journalist, Meni has the capability to make a difference and to help the community. He did it when he was a cop, and he has continued to strive to make positive changes and assist people as a journalist. During his media career, Meni has worked as a researcher, producer, senior reporter, chief of staff, and series producer across such shows as Missing Persons Unit, Wanted, Border Security, Today Tonight, A Current Affairs, The Suspects, and of course, Inside, a documentary on the New South Wales police system. In 2020, he released his first novel called Cop It Sweet, which I've got up on the screen there for you, a non-fiction work chronicling his first few years in the New South Wales Police Force. He rates the television program Missing Persons Unit as the most satisfying job he has ever been involved in. And across 5 series of the program, Meni witnessed firsthand the anguish and helplessness felt by families of people who go missing. But despite the heartache, the program was successful in finding 40 missing people, bringing great relief to their families. Families of missing people have told Meni that it's the unknowing that is the worst, and they describe it as an emotional roller coaster and a nightmare that you never wake up from. It's tough to listen about, and the anguish and pain people go through, and that is one of the reasons he wants to do whatever he can to get the answers for the families. They need to know what happened to their loved ones, because until they do, they can never really move forward. Not knowing if your loved one is alive or dead, safe or in danger, is the cruelest state of mind that anyone can find themselves in. Meni reported on the abduction of Queensland schoolboy Daniel Morecambe from a bus stop on the 3rd of December 2003, and I'm sure the whole of Australia does know the Daniel Morecambe story. He sat with Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise Morecambe, and heard their appeals for help after Daniel disappeared. And the case really affected him because at that time, he had become a first-time father, and the thought of his child going missing was horrifying. He filed a number of reports on the investigation to find Daniel and the subsequent arrest and charging of a man for his murder. Meni says he is honoured to say that Bruce and Denise Morecambe trusted him to share their innermost thoughts and emotions, and they build up a close relationship that continues today, with the Daniel Morecambe Foundation proudly endorsing the Missing podcast. This project is very important to Meni, and he is committed to helping families get the answers that they desperately seek. He hopes that with the help of listeners, The Missing will provide crucial information that will assist police to solve these cases. And his catchphrase, as you can see, is someone, somewhere must know something. It rings true, and he believes that we can make a difference. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to invite to show, just let me turn this on so he can jump on, Meni to the call, please. Let me just see if I can get you 2 seconds. We've just got a few little technical glitches tonight, guys. Just give me a second. There we go. There we go, Meni. Welcome
Hello.
to the call. Welcome, welcome. Sorry about that. A few little technical glitches on a new link, our first new link for this one. So welcome to the call, and how are you?
I'm well, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Much appreciated.
Well written, Meni. So yeah, great. You've done a lot. So tell us, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I've just finished a 6-part series for News Corp. So the last episode went out about 10 days ago. So I'm just in the process now of researching and reaching out to some families and basically just putting together a list of other potential stories for what I hope will be a series 2.
Excellent.
Or series 3, I should say.
So when will that air, Meni, the one you've just completed?
It's out now.
Oh, it's out now, is it?
Yeah, it's out on, it's The Missing Australia. So there's 6 episodes at the moment. So they're on behind a paywall, but after 2 weeks they become available. So I think the first 2 or 3 are now free to listen to. So Spotify, Apple, or you can just go to themissingaustralia.com.au and yeah, so they're all on the main platforms.
Okay, so and a brief on those is you've done 6 different missing people.
Yeah, there are 6 different stories, but what I try and do, I don't just try and do a story like anyone can go on the internet and get information and just tell the facts that we know. So I try and seek out new information, new witnesses, new leads, and that's what we've managed to do with I believe all of these stories. In particular, one from 1965 from Victoria, which was a cold case of a murdered young baby who remains unidentified, and we believe that we've had a major breakthrough in the case. So that's being pursued by Victorian and Northern Territory Police as we speak.
So that was by your investigating, picking up the old cold case and going through it and finding some other leads or finding some information that hadn't been looked at.
Yeah, basically it was a terrible case. In 1965, I think the 3rd of March, someone sent a package from the Russell Street Post Office in Melbourne to Darwin, addressed to J. Anderson, and the package wasn't picked up. And the postal clerk became concerned because it was emitting a putrid smell. He opened it and was horrified to discover the dead body of a newborn baby boy with the umbilical cord still attached. And the child had taken a breath or a couple of breaths and then had been strangled with a stocking that was still around its throat. So it was addressed to J. Anderson. Northern Territory Police were never able to find out who J. Anderson was, and the address of the sender in Victoria was fake. So I did the story and I tracked down the only surviving officer, the forensic officer at the time. He's 83, lives in far north Queensland, and he shared with me something he'd never shared before, and that was that there was a very famous Indigenous AFL player that he knew during the 60s and early 70s in Darwin, the Northern Territory, a gentleman called Jimmy Anderson. So I did the story, and I said, look, it's pure speculation, but what if it was meant to be to go to Jimmy Anderson? And Mr. Anderson's daughters contacted me after they heard the podcast, and they're convinced that their father was the father of the child. But he's committed no offence. He's done nothing wrong. So, yeah, there are two possible scenarios. One, an abandoned woman has sent the child to the man who abandoned her. The second scenario, which is the one I probably tend to lead with, is that a woman became pregnant out of wedlock, a married woman. Her husband discovered what had happened, wasn't sure if the child was his or the woman's lover. Made her have the child at home, and then when the child was born, he murdered it, and then in a terrible act of revenge, he sent it to his wife's lover.
Wow. Okay.
And Jeff, what follow-up questions do you have after that, mate?
Yeah. Well, it's a shocking story, right?
Yeah.
It is. It's shocking.
Meni, I'm concerned for your PTSD, mate. How's it going?
No. I'm all good, mate. But when doing this story, the main concern was to reach out and let Jimmy Anderson's family know, and I was able to do that. He has I think a son or a grandson who plays AFL. I won't say the team, but I managed to get a message to the media guy at the particular club, and sort of let them know about the story. So yeah, but regardless, it's 58 years old. But Steve, you would know there's no statute of limitation to murder. So if the person or persons who killed this child are alive, they'll and they're found, they'll be charged with murder.
100%. Yeah, no statute of limitations for serious crime.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I was fresh on the scene when Kira Steinhardt was abducted and murdered in Rockhampton.
Yeah, terrible.
Terrible, absolutely terrible.
I remember it well. I was working for Seven in Brisbane at the time.
You were working for Seven, right? Yeah,
we covered it. I remember.
Yeah, I was a 3.5 year constable at that point in time, and it's a very fresh wound, even for me still today. Yeah. But I just want to say, thankfully, I got to look into the eyes of that killer, and I was glad to see that. But my honest opinion is he'll never be released. The horrific things.
I think he died in jail, mate.
Yeah, right. It's over now.
I think a couple of years ago he died in jail because he was charged with her murder and the murder of another girl in an abandoned hotel room.
Yeah, that's right.
It was. Yeah,
that's right.
I forget the girl's name. I think it was an Italian name. Yeah, but I interviewed Kira's mother at the time, I believe, and yeah, it was a terrible, terrible case. And that guy was a violent predator who, should never have been released in the first place.
Never have been released in the first place.
Yeah,
mate. What's the you've got obviously have no powers of arrest anymore, other than a citizen's power of arrest, which is substantial, and not many people understand that. But what's it like when you when you get so close with this information? Like just a piece of luck. What's it like when you get so close? Look,
it's terrific because I guess in this case we don't know. Normally you're dealing with the emotions of family, so that's enough to motivate you. In this case, we don't know who the child is, but I think anyone with an ounce of humanity would agree that it's a terrible crime, and I think it's important to give this child a name and a proper burial. And the two ladies who contacted me, who were Jimmy Anderson's daughters, who believe that this could be their older brother, that's what they want. They want to give this child a name and a proper burial and do all that. So, and I think that's pretty important. So, but yeah, look, when there's a breakthrough, I mean, it's wonderful because you would know many of these cases, long-term missing persons cases, there's more than 2,600. That's someone missing for more than 90 days, 3 months. And police follow a trail, but then it goes cold. Yeah. And they rely on information from members of the public to come in. So, if that's what I do. If I find something or, people come to me, I just pass it on to the police. they're the experts, they're the ones with the powers, and let them do their thing. My main thing is to keep these cases alive in the public domain, and to appeal to people, because there are people with information who look deep into their soul, look into their conscience, and do the right thing, and pick up the phone and call police.
Meni, I've got a tough question here for you. Okay. The retired forensics officer who you spoke with in Far North Queensland, he's mentioned to you, the link with the football player.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it seems strange to me that he would miraculously remember that after all this time. And I wonder, did he mention to you that he had raised that and perhaps was asked to sit on that back in the day?
No. So what happened? It wasn't something that he had forgotten and came. When he saw the name Jay Anderson, he immediately thought of this gentleman because he paid. Now, he was a young forensics officer, so he did the forensics. The detectives did all the other inquiries.
Yep.
To try and trace a Jay Anderson. Now, because it was so long ago, we don't know about the records. Now, they may have gone to Mr. Anderson, right? But if Mr. Anderson had just said, well, no, that's not me, I know nothing about it, well, there's no offence committed.
No, of course.
The offence is down in Melbourne. So yeah, that was just something he always thought. He didn't know, he couldn't remember whether, during the inquiries by detectives, whether they actually did speak to Jimmy Anderson. And he, even though he knew him casually as a friend, he said that it was not something you would go and raise with someone. He was a married man at the time, had children. It's not something you raise. I guess being unfaithful is not a criminal offence. So that's why it wasn't raised. But whether Mr. Anderson was spoken to back in the day, we don't know, because I guess those records are probably not around anymore.
Cool.
Yeah,
Gentlemen,
it's amazing how time actually helped this investigation. Sorry, Ainsley.
That's okay. I just would like to ask a question from our listeners, because obviously they do chip in from time to time with questions. Maybe either of you will be able to answer this. Has there been a significant increase in missing children over the decades? Is it getting more and more?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And I think there's 38,000 missing persons reports that are taken by police. 99% more of those, they're found very, very quickly. So long-term missing persons is the crucial figure of 2,600. But I don't think so. I don't think missing kids. I mean, of course, we've had William Tyrrell in the last a few years, but no, I don't think so. And I think it's these days with mobile phones, with CCTV cameras, all that sort of stuff, I think excuse me, I'm sure it still happens, but I don't think the numbers have increased. Not in my experience anyway.
One that I think I would love to see come to closure, which is one that everybody heard about over here, and that was back in 1996-97, the Claremont serial killers, two of which bodies were found, and of course the family of Sarah Spears has still never really got closure. So that's a long time for someone to go through that anguish of not knowing where their loved one is. And you obviously speak to some of these people. What's it like for them? And especially when you find the person and they have that closure, then what's it like?
Well, it's a relief, because even though people are caught in two minds, I mean, they want to find out what happened to their loved one, but then they know that there's a good chance their loved one is going to be deceased. So, they don't want to find out to some degree. But the majority, they need some form of resolution, because if they have that resolution, then they have somewhere they can do, the cultural norms of having a funeral, and they'll have somewhere to go and visit. When you don't know, you're just in a constant state. You're in a holding pattern, basically. That's it. You're in a constant state of inertia. You have no idea. So even bad news, it gives you some form of resolution, and you can move on, a bit easier. Because when you don't know, and the sad part is many families, especially parents, they go to their grave never knowing what happened to their loved one.
I imagine this type of work is can be quite taxing and traumatic for all involved who are researching and doing this and going through all that data and whatnot. How do you cope with all that? What do you do for yourself to manage all of that?
Oh, look, the hard thing is you can get, and I do. I mean, I get, you get personally involved, and you know, I mean, I do interviews, and I tear up, and I cry. I mean, it's hard not to get involved. But look, I guess it doesn't affect me in a negative way, because while I'm doing this, I know that I'm trying to help, and I know it needs to be done, and it's difficult, and but I know it needs to be done. There's not enough attention on long-term missing people, and police, they've got heavy workloads. They've got a lot of stuff to do. They don't have a crystal ball where they can look in and discover, where missing people are. So they rely on members of the public to, like I said earlier, to pick up the phone. And that's what I'm trying to do, make that appeal, keep it out there, and hope that someone with information, that it touches something inside them where they'll, end up doing the right thing.
What ultimately made you jump from being in the police force to wanting to go to the media?
Money. He wanted more money.
No.
Better hours.
No, not at all. No, I went through a terrible time. I was a young, naive constable training to be a detective, and I got basically railroaded by some corrupt police. So I had to go through a long period where I had to prove my innocence, and I did that, and then I was reinstated, and I wanted explanation for what happened to me. I wanted the corrupt cops that set me up to be held accountable, and the hierarchy at the time covered it all up. And then they wanted me to go back, and they offered me, any type of coastal position or anything like that. And basically, in the end, I couldn't trust them again. So the 7:30 report on the ABC, they heard about what happened to me. They did a whole show. So it was a whole 30-minute show. And then they subsequently did another 6 follow-ups over the next 2 weeks. And a television producer saw me on there and then rang me up and said, I'm putting together a new show called Hard Copy. I'm looking for a reporter. You're staying in the police, or what are you doing? And I had a thought of, think about it. I couldn't see myself returning to the police, even though I loved it, and I wanted it to make my, once someone burns you, it's pretty hard to trust again.
Yeah.
So I left the police and I took up this reporter's job, and I've been in the media ever since.
Enjoying it?
Yeah, look, I love it. Yeah, I mean it's look, the media is like the police. You have an opportunity to help and to do good. And yeah, I mean, the media doesn't always get it right. I mean, I don't think the media is what it used to be. I think it's, everything now, like the news and that, it's reading a press release. They rarely, do in-depth interview investigations and stuff. But I mean, the media, you have the power to help people, and I think that's important.
Of all the shows that we read out that you have been involved in, what's been the one that you've enjoyed the most?
Well, Missing Persons Unit. Yeah, because it was, I worked with a good team of people, and it gave me a firsthand. I really got to see, dealing with these families, about the pain and heartbreak they go through, and it wasn't always sad, because we found, as you mentioned, 40 people, so that's great. But I think that was the show. That was the one where I would probably go home at the end of the day and feel the most satisfied that I thought I had, contributed or done something, no matter how small, but to help people.
Just go back to the missing persons. You're saying there's 38,000, and Kent, you can jump in here. I thought there was like something like 24,000, and sorry, 24,000 of those were children, and 8,000 were never found. Is that something that we can
No, look, Jeff, there is.
There is,
and that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Look, the latest statistics definitely are that there's been a substantial increase in missing children in Australia, including children that are never seen again. It's more than look, I'll go and get the exact statistics and I'll put them up on the main channel. Meni, if you get to see that, and I'm sure Jeff will fill you in on that,
Yeah.
be disgusted and appalled. And the number's so high, mate, you won't believe it.
Is that from sex trafficking, mate?
Mate, well, look, the children go missing. Many of them get found, but the number that never get found again is so high, you can't believe it.
Wow.
And it's so high, you think, well, you'd think in this country that whenever a child goes missing and isn't found, that would be on the news, right? Or that it would be in the newspapers. Well, I can guarantee you it's not. It's the amount of children who go missing in this country, and that's a verified fact by a group of people who've been running a very high quality data retrieval scenario against these statistics. They're heavily into fighting sex trafficking against children. But obviously, you're aware of this. When the child goes missing and is never found, not even a trace of them, how can you prove what happened? So it's quite, it's very alarming. The number is so high, it will make you sick.
Yeah, you know, I'd love to see the statistics. That's terrible.
Yeah.
But Ken, on that, so with that, like we obviously had the case of William Tyrrell and that it's made massive media. So with these ones here that we're suggesting, are they in areas that are just not making the media, or like, I don't know, outback areas?
Look, Jeff, I don't know, and I can't make. And look, I can tell you what currently serving police are telling me. I can tell you what mothers and relatives of children that go missing permanently are telling me. There's a lot of scuttlebutt and talk, but how to prove that? I mean, when you consistently hear of sex farms through certain places in Australia, and when you hear the information from relatives of the children and also from currently serving police who get told to shut up and they end up being railroaded, and some of them lose their career because they make inquiries, it's very, very alarming. And let's face it, no one in Queensland is impressed with the quality of the leadership inside the Queensland Police Service. And there are detectives who, talk all the time with me, and past detectives, past senior commissioned officers, and they are disgusted with the direction that the department is headed. But, you'll hear me talking in quite bland terms about it because I don't want to release those sources, and the amount of suppression that will come against shows like this in the future, particularly with the laws that have just been passed in Queensland, and also the Identify and Disrupt legislation passed by the federal government. They don't want small, social media groups like this talking about those things. So we're going to play that close to our chest at the moment, but when we get facts, we will release them as they can be proven.
All right, I'm just going to shift gears for a moment, Ken. I'd like to bring it back to Meni. Shows about him tonight. So Meni, I just want to just quickly go across to here. I want to talk to you about your book that you've written. Just let me get rid of that. Cop It Sweet. One of the reviews that we've seen on your book is saying it was hard to put down Cop It Sweet. The book contains very enjoyable anecdotes written well in an entertaining style. The author sets up the characters' description, their stories and his recollection well, interlaced with humour. Other stories describe the sadness and despair of drugs and their victims. Policing in the 80s was very different to today, and I look forward to a sequel. Tell us a bit about the book, and is there going to be a sequel?
Yeah, there will be a sequel once I get stuck into it. But no, the book is just basically covers the first couple of years that I was in the police at Darlinghurst mainly, and then King's Cross. But we were the same patrol. King's Cross was the substation, and yeah, just the experiences I had. I mean, I was I think 20 or 21. I was naive. I'd never been away from home. Naive to the point that I thought that everyone in the world had a loving, caring family, and lived under a roof and had a warm bed to sleep in. And then I'm working up there, and there's all these what we call DOS houses, these horrible boarding houses, and very lonely people living there. And, I saw my first dead person, and we used to call him a dead one. And that had a profound effect on me, because it was an English gentleman. He had died sitting in a chair out the back of a disgusting boarding house. And we had to go up to his room to, look for identification, next of kin, that sort of stuff. And it was a tiny room, and he was sleeping he was a big man. He was sleeping in a small bed that probably, suited more for a child. And I remember I found in a drawer near his bed was a little steel cigarette box. Cigarettes back in the 60s, 70s would come in little steel boxes. And I opened it up, and there was all these black and white photos. And he was a member of the RAF, the Royal Air Force in England. And there he was in uniform with another airline guy and two women. And on the back, it said, I forget his name, but to so-and-so, love Lucy. And it really hit me, because he had no one. He was just going to be given a pauper's burial. And I found it hard to comprehend how he had gone from being this, young, strapping hero who fought for his country to, dying in a shitty DOS house on the other side of the world in Australia, in Darlinghurst, with no one who cared about him.
So what inspired you to go ahead and write a book about your time in the force?
Just a lot of stories. Yeah, I had a lot of stories. They were experiences that not many people experienced, and policing has changed now. So, I say to people, I've changed names, etc. But you read stories, and you'll read things police did, and other things like that, and people will be shocked. But I believe in always being honest, so I wrote an honest account. I wasn't going to sanitize it. There's some stories that are really funny, and there was some stories that are really sad, and there are probably a couple of other stories that fill you with a little bit of inspiration. But they're all true, and King's Cross and Darlinghurst was full of amazing characters. Back in the 80s when I was there. And that included police. So it was just, they're good stories, and I just wanted to share them.
A couple of questions from me, Meni. What are the technicalities, mate, of getting into these cold cases, and the technicalities around selecting which ones?
Look, I think number one, and this is something where I was actually contacted by a university student who asked me some questions recently for a paper they're writing. And it was about the morals and ethics of true crime, because true crime has just sprung out. Anyone now can get a microphone and do a true crime podcast and everything. I think for me, one of the most important ethics that I always abide by is I'll only do a story if the family are happy to participate. And there's a lot of true crime where they go out there and they'll talk about terrible crimes, and the family don't want them to do it, and they don't participate, but they still do it. Firstly for me, the family has to want to talk, and many of the stories I do, I've been contacted by families, so they want me to cover the story of their missing loved one. So that's mainly the main thing. You got to have family on side, and where possible, have police on side. So police can tell us from an investigative point of view. They know what they're looking for, so they can tell us or make appeals. And you just, if there are witnesses, you try and find witnesses. But what I do, mate, is when I do a story, I don't just sit in my office. So with the one I told you about, the baby in the post in Melbourne, I travelled to Melbourne. And, I recorded myself at the old Russell Street post office. So, I went back in time, and it would have been very busy. And I'm saying, well, imagine someone walking down the street holding a dead baby in a package and that. The last episode I did was a gentleman that went missing in Bundaberg, and they found his motorbike a couple of hours out of Bundaberg down an embankment on a very isolated road on the Gingin Mount Perry Road. So I went out there with his wife, and we stood there at the spot, and we talked about it. So So yeah, that's the main thing, just basically a story. If there's a new angle to it or a new lead, so I can progress it, because that's the main thing. I mean, just doing a story, like a lot of true crime, they just tell the story. Like the perpetrator's already been caught, he's already been dealt with. It's basically just not glorifying the thing, but just telling a story, sort of making a buck or whatever out of someone else's misfortune. So people have to be willing to talk to me, and I want to progress it because I want these cases to be solved.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No. Go ahead, Jeff.
Have you ever, through the shows you've done in the past, have you ever found the missing persons?
Yeah, on Missing Persons Unit. During the course of the 5 series we did, we found 40 people. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they weren't. Many of them were not long-term missing people. So when we made that program, the reality of what Missing Persons Unit was and how it's portrayed on TV was not real life, because the production company would pay in particular the New South Wales Police Force a sum of money, and they would have 4 officers go to Missing Persons Unit. And then I'd be there in the morning and we'd go through the cases, say 30 cases come in overnight. I'd pick my top 3 or 4, and then you'd ring the family and say, oh, look, say it's a runaway kid. So they were one's runaway kid, elderly people with dementia. And then you would say to them, well, look, we have a film crew here. They'll follow the story. So there'll be 2 police assigned to finding your kid. So for parents, that was a good incentive, because the police, but that wasn't the way it operated in real life. So in those cases, you would invariably find, missing kids and that. A couple of those were long-term missing. Yeah, but most of them, as I said, out of the 38,000, more than 99% are found quickly.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Kurt?
Yeah, well, we've had a question from Gary. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Oh,
Gary,
yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
What types of thanks. What types of pressure or persuasions are applied to you to not proceed with a story? Good question.
Well, look, what I do is with every story, before I do a story, I contact the police and I try, I ask them, is it okay to do it? Now, I am in there's no responsibility on me, under no obligation to do that, right? But I do it. That's my way of doing business, because I'm conscious that these cold cases very often reviewed, and I'm conscious that police could be working on a case, so I don't want to interfere with it. So if I want to do a story and I say, hey, I want to do a story on Joe Blogs, is it okay? If the police come back to me and say, oh, Meni, we'd rather you don't do it, well, that's it. I move on. Yeah. I don't need to know why. I trust the judgment of the police. And look, at the end of the day, I'm trying to assist, not to hinder. And we know that the media many times has screwed up court cases, has screwed up, police investigations. I guess the one that we more recently is the Higgins thing with Channel 10 and Lisa Wilkinson and all that. So that's something I would never wish to do, especially if police are close to cracking something. So yeah, I always check with police, and I'm under no obligation to do so.
Cool. Just another question, just for our listeners, just because some people are not aware, you guys, probably a simple question for you guys. What is a citizen's power of arrest? Some people don't know what that is. Can you just explain that?
I'll let my friend go. He's probably more across it than I am.
It's a very,
do you want to answer this one?
Look, it's a very complicated issue. And it would take some time to explain, but I'll just make it very simple. If citizens see someone doing something wrong that they think is a crime, they've got the right to tell them they're under arrest and keep them there until police arrive. My recommendation to that would be give consideration to your safety, and don't overstretch yourself just by saying, I'm making a citizen's arrest. That will not keep you safe. There you go.
Cool. Meni, I just want to, something caught my eye when I was doing a little bit of a reviewing into the book and things like that. So I'm just going to flick back to the book for a minute.
No worries.
On one of the reviews I think I saw when it was up there, I can't remember which site it was now, your publisher and editor said, "What the hell were you thinking?" And if there's one chapter that you read in this book, it's got to be chapter 9. Give us an insight. What's involved in chapter 9? Oh, look, I'm going to go get the book because I'm curious now, but tell us what's chapter 9 all about?
Well, it was a very strange sex act is probably the only way I can describe it. So back at Darlinghurst Police Station in '84, when I started there was a tiny little room, and it had one of those old telephone switch boxes, switches, where you would put the plugs in.
Yep.
And so there was, number 8 was the detective. It was all different, and it would light up when someone rang. And line 22 was a direct link to St Vincent's Hospital, which is the busiest emergency hospital probably in Australia. It was like half a K down the road, because we used to get prisoners' meals from there and stuff like that. And early one Sunday morning, it went off, and a nurse came on board, and I asked how I could help her, and she was having difficulty explaining herself. She was like embarrassed, couldn't get it out. Went on for about 5 minutes or so, which is a long time on the phone. And I said, "Look, please just tell me what's going on." And she proceeded to tell me, so this is the middle of January, super hot, that a young man had walked in wearing a large overcoat, and he was ushered into a cubicle, curtains drawn, and when he opened the overcoat, he was holding it was either a 15 or 20 pound weight, the plate, the round plate that goes on either side of a bar.
Yeah.
And for some reason that only he will know, he had put his erect penis through the middle of the bar, and he couldn't extract it because it was erect and it was tight. The blood couldn't escape. So she wanted me to do something, and I don't know what the hell I was going to do. So
a hockey stick, a hockey stick, yeah.
So I said, "Well, call the fireys," and she says, "Oh, we've called the fireys." I said to call you. So I said, "Well, okay, I'll sort something out." So I got off the phone. I spoke to a senior constable, and he said, "Mate, see if after he stopped laughing, he said, see if the police rescue are on." So I put it, no mobile phones then. So I put it over the radio. They rang the station. The sergeant was there from police rescue, and I proceeded to tell him, and he says, "Oh, get stuff, mate. Don't stop stirring." And I said, "Mate, I'm not stirring. They're down at St Vincent's," and I put it on the telephone pad. So the telephone message pad was when you got a call, you'd write a number and the time it came, what the job was, and then the third column was whoever did the job would have to write it off. So this senior constable had made me put it on the pad. So anyway, they proceeded to go down there, and they found the man who was obviously distressed. They used an angle grinder to cut through the plate. And then they came back to the police station to write off the telephone message pad, and that telephone message pad was put on the telex, and it went to every police station in New South Wales and probably interstate. And the sergeant wrote it off. He said, "Attended at whatever time it was and saw a patient who was in a great deal of distress. We were able to relieve the pain, but we left the swelling."
I'm sure he will never, ever, ever live that one down.
No.
So I can see now why your publisher said, "What the hell were you thinking?" So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go and get that book, it's called Cop It Sweet. You can Google it, and you'll be able to find that on a number of book places. So that's interesting. Another question for you, Meni. We've got about 10 minutes left before our interview finishes. Did you have a particular theory about the Daniel Morcombe case? Is another question from somebody.
Oh, look, I don't think it was a theory. I mean, from the very beginning, it was obvious that Daniel had been abducted. So so from the very, very beginning, I mean, that's what police, I think, believed. I know that when I spoke I think I interviewed Bruce and Denise within weeks of Daniel's disappearance, and I know from the very, very beginning, within probably days, Bruce Morcombe had accepted and conceded that he wouldn't find Daniel alive. Denise, on the other hand, held out hope. And probably the last interview I did would have been maybe a year or two before they arrested Brett Cowan, his killer, and found some of Daniel's remains. And I flew up to the Sunshine Coast where they lived, and 3 or 4 years had passed, and Denise had finally packed Daniel's clothing, putting it, wasn't giving it away. We were going to put it in storage. And I remember asking her, saying, "Oh, like if Daniel comes back, if he's alive, the clothes won't fit him, And she said, "Oh yeah, I know," but she goes, "But I still believe that, he could be alive." And then, she said, "You always hear about it in America," and that's what always struck me about Daniel's case. You have two loving parents, but Bruce had conceded very early on that he'd never see his son again, whereas Denise, I believe, up until they found Daniel's remains and arrested Brett Cowan, held out hope that the little boy would come home. So yeah, it was a horrible case, but I think from the very beginning it was obvious that he'd been abducted.
Mate, have you ever had to look? It might be an off the wall question for you, but it comes from experience with me because of the terrible things that we deal with, and many of the people who hear this story these stories will not comprehend just how awful it can be. Being a police officer and also investigating these types of things in the media and so forth. So do you have a psychologist and a coach who's able to be there for your team to deal with trauma that you guys might experience?
No. There's no team. There's me, and I have my editor, who comes out with me sometimes on location, or producer, so she does the recordings. No, look, I think it's one of those things. You don't dwell on the heartache and that. I mean, you can't help but become affected. And as I said, I often cry during interviews. But I think what I concentrate on is more so that I believe the work I'm doing is important. And I believe it's important to keep these cases in the public spotlight and keep them alive. And that's what I concentrate on. So, maybe if I didn't, and I probably dwelled on the other things. But look, in your police career, I don't know what you saw, but look, I have always said I was very, very fortunate. In King's Cross, we attended some murders, serious assaults. It was drugs, prostitution, that sort of stuff. I'm so thankful that I wasn't in the suburbs and turned up to a cot death. I think that would have devastated me. I'm forever thankful that I didn't work out in the country and turned up at a mangled car wreck with bits of local kids all over the place. So most police, I think, have experienced far more horrific things than I did. Where I worked at the Cross. So I'm forever thankful for that, because I think, seeing especially a young baby that was deceased, probably would have knocked me around quite a bit.
Do you think your time with the police force sort of not hardened you in some way, but kind of prepared you, toughened you up for what it is that you're doing now to some degree, which is why you don't have those psychologists and whatnot in the need for them?
No, you know what I think? I think what the police did for me. I mean, I've always been empathetic, but I think when you see victims and that, so I think it gave me even more empathy for people. I think the police, I was very, very lucky. I worked with some really good, experienced police. And I think one of the greatest skills it gave me was in how to deal with people, how to speak to people, how to be, I guess, to express that you're someone of integrity, and that people can trust you, and that's very important to me. My word is very important to me. I mean, probably my my badge of honor is that in the 10+ years I did nightly current affairs, I never appeared. I was never a subject of anything on Media Watch. I've never had a complaint against me. I still have. I'm still in contact with people I did stories 25 years ago, because for me, if someone talks to me, especially there's a big story, everyone's chasing it. So if someone would choose to talk to me rather than my opposition, and that, to me, that's a big honor, that they're trusting me So I've always, integrity and ethical, and because it's very important. My word's my word, and I never go back on that. And I had arguments with producers who may want me to skewer a story a different way, but it doesn't matter. If it's got my name and my head and my voice on it, well, you've just got to do the right thing, because that's a big deal for people to share their innermost experiences with you. Especially experiences that are heartbreaking and of course pain.
Mate, given the way, oh, sorry, Ainsley.
Oh, it's all right. I was just going to run to another question, Kent, and then we'll run to you. Another question from one of our listeners. In the Daniel Morecambe case, this seems to be a hot topic one tonight for you. It was reported in the press after a very long time that there were at least 7 known sex offenders in the immediate area at the time. Was it one of these that was identified as the killer?
Yeah.
Not sure if something you can
I'm not sure. I'd be guessing. The only people that would know that would be the police that worked on the investigation, and I had nothing to do with the investigation, so I really couldn't give you an answer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, mate. Look, I just want to say, given, and you alluded before that the media is not what it used to be.
No.
And there seems to be, look. The Australian public are losing faith in a lot of the things that the media say. So just from an ex-copper to you in the work that you're doing as a journalist, I want to congratulate you for your integrity. I particularly loved that that you would seek the permission of the police. That's intelligent to not ruin an investigation. I see the media regularly ruin investigations. As far as I knew, that was a crime for them to do that. I don't know why they get away with it. And I'm also grateful to you for your integrity with the parents and being tender towards their concerns and needs. It's an ethic that I think sadly is being lost in the media. Have you run into, well, I don't think you will. I don't think you will run into any objections with you wanting to maintain that integrity, except maybe with a producer who's seeking ratings. Are you able to elaborate on any stoushes you might have had with upper management so that you can keep your integrity?
Look, I think when I was working in television once, there was, I was working in Today Tonight. There's a great rivalry between us and Current Affair. And, most stories they get out of newspapers. And there was a story, I think, out of a suburban newspaper up in Brisbane about some bloke reckoned he'd been ripped off by a car yard. And, nightly current affairs, car salesmen, crooks, real estate, crooks. That's sort of bread and butter, the stuff they love, and trashed houses.
Sure.
It's a formula. So I was always up early. So I met the crew at the bottom of the mountain because the TV station was a place called Mount Cootha. And they had the article there, and I'm sort of reading it. And I always like to check. And I learned a long time ago that, you should check, because sometimes, things that are in the paper or whatever are wrong. So I think I rang the car yard and got through and was talking to someone and said, mate, what's the go? This is what's happened. This bloke's bought a car and he reckoned you ripped him off the car, whatever isn't working or whatever. And he proceeded to tell me that he'd sold a car. It was a bloke for $5-6 grand, nothing. And there was no warranty on it. And the gearbox went and the bloke went back or whatever. Anyway, he didn't have to, but he put a new gearbox in for him, right? Got a reconditioned one and gave it to him. But the guy then wanted him to give him some money as well, right? So it wasn't a story. So I said to the boys, I said, turn around, go back. And they go, what do you mean? It's like the lead. I was like, I don't give a shit. Anyway, so I went back and then the boss, what are you doing? I said, well, it's a bullshit story. And they still didn't care. They still wanted me to do it. I wouldn't do it. I said, no, I'm not doing it. Because you do a story like that, you ruin a guy's business, right? And the other thing I'd done, in the interim, I'd checked with the motor traders, never had a complaint. I checked with Fair Trading, never had a complaint, right? So the guy was a good, honest businessman. But, sometimes they get caught up in this, for ratings or whatever, and they don't give a shit. There's a particular story that I remember with someone that I'd actually worked with, and he spent 2-3 weeks following around this guy who was apparently the Australia's worst suspended driver, for drink driving and all sorts of things. And, they finally got this guy driving. There he is again. He's, doesn't have a license. He's driving here. We filmed him 20 times and all this sort of stuff, and stuck a camera in his face. And anyway, then it led the show. Wrong guy. It was the neighbour. Yeah. And the guy got, not only did the station get sued, but the journo got sued himself.
Wow.
So, you can't do stuff like it. You're playing with people's lives.
Well, I appreciate your integrity, mate. I really do. I'm really grateful.
Guys,
Thanks.
we are basically out of time tonight. Meni, I want to thank you for joining us. If you'd just like to you were talking about communication. If you just want to leave one piece of advice in regard to communication with our listeners tonight, what would it be?
Communication. I don't know. I think the main thing is always to be honest, and I think that's it. I think people communication, and even when it comes to missing people, because one reason people disappear is because they want to self-harm. So so I guess if the main thing, I think, for anyone, if you're going through a tough period or whatever, talk to someone, because that seems to be a bit of an epidemic at the moment. Especially young people and people, taking their own lives and self-harming. So just speak up and seek a friend.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed tonight's episode, you can follow The Missing Australia on their website, themissingaustralia.com.au. Also in the chat there, we've put the link to the Missing Australia podcast. We will put it in the replays for you so that you can follow up. If you know anyone or can help with these guys, then do follow up with them. Meni, Caroutas, I want to thank you so much for your time in being with us on the interview tonight. Thank you to Ken, and thank you to Jeff for joining me as well. As always, it's a pleasure.
Nice to meet you, Ken.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks to each and every one of us for showing up, and we'll see you next time on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Yeah. Thanks, Meni.
See you guys.
Bye now.